Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, City Attorney, City Manager, ladies and gentlemen. Cell phones cause cancer. That's what numerous doctors and scientists from all around the world have been warning us about for years. On May 31st, 2011, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, put out a report that says your chance of becoming a cancer victim doubles once you hit the 10-year mark of using cell phones for a minimum of 30 minutes per day. And yes, there are industry-funded studies that tell us not to worry about cell phones, or that it'll take another 20 or 30 years of research before we know whether cell phones cause cancer. In essence, they're telling us to treat cell phones like cigarettes 30 years ago. I, for one, happen to know that cell phones do cause cancer because everything we're being warned about by the World Health Organization's report and prestigious university professors like Dr. Deborah Davis fits me. I'm an attorney. From 2001 to 2011, I used to use cell phones a lot more than just 30 minutes a day. I always held it in my left hand, up against my left ear, and I carried them around in my suit jacket's inner pockets. Lo and behold, if you were standing close to me, you'd see that there's a scar on my left hand, the result of nerve tumor removal surgery. If you can see the scar on the left side of my head, that's the result of brain cancer surgery on August 23rd, 2011. That's glioblastoma multiforme level 4. On top of that, I have an MRI that shows a tumor at my aortic bifurcation, right where my cell phone sat in my suit jackets. So that's 1, 2, 3 results of having a cell phone against my body. If you don't agree, just read through the booklet that was in the box when you bought your cell phone. If you have the time to dig through those 200 or 300 pages, somewhere in there you'll see that your cell phone emits a type of non-ionized radiation into your body. Radiation that they prefer to talk about as radio frequency and specific absorption rate. Somewhere near the term SAR, you'll see them asking you to always keep your cell phone away from your body because of the radiation. And by body, they mean your entire body. So if you're one of the people we saw on the news standing in line to get your hands on an iPhone 5, please be advised that somewhere in that manual, they're telling you to always keep it at least 10 millimeters away from your body. That's about an inch. Did you know that you're supposed to keep that thing an inch away from your body? Do your children know that? I'm pretty sure that's not what they see on TV or anything that we see in cell phone commercials. If you pay attention to what doctors and scientists are telling us about cell phones, look up what it says in your cell phone manual and put all of that together with the scars you see on a growing number of cancer victims like me. It should become crystal clear that cell phones do cause cancer and that the American people are not being properly warned about cell phones. Now, ever since my surgery, I've been doing all that I can to help spread the word about cell phone-induced cancer. If you spend time on Facebook, just look up Pembroke Pines, Jimmy Gonzalez. Go through an album that I've titled Jimmy versus Cell Phone-Induced Cancer, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm here today because I believe my city commission can do something to warn adults and their children about keeping cell phones away from their bodies. I think Pembroke Pines should follow the examples set forth by San Francisco and several city commissions in California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maine, New York, not to mention the nations of India, Canada, France, Russia, etc., on this issue. I respectfully ask that you read through San Francisco's Right to Know Ordinance, and I brought a copy, the information posters that they came up with, and show your voters that you too are willing to do whatever it takes to warn everybody about keeping cell phones away from their bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. You'll get that to us. Okay, City Clerk. Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes, Jimmy, thank you for having the courage to come forward to share your story. Commissioner Castillo, Jimmy lives in your district. I met Jimmy and his family a few years ago, and several months back I learned about the affliction and the struggles he was going through. What he didn't tell you is the man should not be standing here today based on the type of cancer he had. A life expectancy of 9 to 12 months, and you're in month 13 or 14, correct, Jimmy?
Yes.
And you got some really good news from the doctors recently, correct?
Correct. I'm doing well as compared to many other patients who unfortunately continue to put cell phones against their heads.
Yeah, and again, I want to thank you for bringing the awareness not only to this community, but your continuous effort of ensuring that cell phone use and reading the manual is most important.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Castillo.
Jimmy, I'd like for you and I to get together and talk. I'd like for you and I to get together and to talk a little bit more about this. And if you will leave your name, your address, and your phone number with the clerk, I want us to get together. I want to learn more about this. This is the first time that someone has come here to talk about this issue. And I think that if we're going to proceed as a city, the first thing we need to do is we need to catch up with your fact base. And I think that this is a very, very important issue. And I want to tell you, when I devote myself to something, it's 100%. So if you will leave your name, your address, and your phone number with the clerk, you will get a call from me next week so that we can get together and we can start talking about this. We can start gathering information and see what the best approach for this is.
Thank you, Commissioner.
How about the hearing earpiece? Better?
The hearing earpiece is the Bluetooth or whatever they want to call it. How is that thing getting a message from your cell phone?
Some thing in the ear.
Essentially, a lot of the people that I see wearing it wear it like an earring. So if they say that, well, it has less radiation or radio frequency, but you're wearing it in your ear all day, which one is worse?
Okay. Well, because Commissioner Castillo, we want to look at this seriously. We will certainly be in touch with you, and thank you for coming forward.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Mayor.
it.
There are now 26 million mobile phones being used in Australia, and the debate about the possible dangers of using a mobile continues to build. Now, some cancer survivors are calling for governments to take the drastic step of banning all mobile phone use for children under 16 and for the rest of us to text instead of call. Laura Sparks has this exclusive report.
My tumour was just here, hence there's a scar there.
Tumours in the left frontal lobe, which was basically around there.
It was like there.
About that big, just here.
You start at the ear and go straight into your brain, and that's your auditory nerve, and it grows around that.
They share a bond. They have the same scars, the same dreaded X-rays, reminders of where their brain tumours once were. They're from different suburbs, cities and social circles. Yet they all got tumours near their ear. And they all blame the same thing.
I'd use my phone about 2 hours a day.
The area that it was here, and I mean, you put two and two together.
I believe it's a lot of heavy mobile phone use.
I just hope it's in my lifetime that phone companies are held accountable for this damage.
Emily Sefton had the most to lose. She was diagnosed with a brain tumour when her son Jesse, now 2, was just 11 weeks old.
I was just devastated. I just remember dropping my son off to my mother-in-law, and I just thought, you know, am I going to see him again?
The International Agency for Research on Cancer recently declared mobile phones as a possible cause of cancer.
I feel vindicated in some respect.
This latest admission doesn't surprise former mobile phone salesman David Smith. He first spoke to Today Tonight 3 years ago. So David, the tumour was just here, is that right, behind your ear?
That's right, behind my right ear.
Lately, there's been conflicting reports about mobile phone use, some saying they do pose a risk, others saying there's no problem at all. But in the fine print of the World Health Organisation's latest report, it states that heavy users of mobile phones, now that's people that use mobile phones for half an hour a day for more than 10 years, triple their risk of getting a brain tumour.
I just would hate for people watching this right now in 10 years' time to go, far out, why didn't I take note? Why didn't I listen? I honestly believe that I'm in this position right now with this tumour because I've overused my phone.
Last year, we filmed Anna Tarrant's tumour removal. 7 months on, she suffers from fatigue, short-term memory loss, migraines, and, like the others, has the ever-present threat that the tumour will grow back. Christian Giorgio had his tumour cut out 9 months ago. What worries do you have?
That it's going to become another epidemic.
There were others who couldn't make our filming. Aaron Rose suffered a seizure that night. Truy Bottoms had chemotherapy that day. And then there's former television producer Romaine Udale.
Well, it's a new club, which unfortunately I'm part of.
She had to go into surgery the day before we filmed because the tumour, taken out 7 months ago, had already started to grow back.
If someone had told me that years ago, I would have welcomed that information and not abused the mobile.
Having emerged from round 2 of brain surgery, Romaine, now an executive coach, is keen to get the message out.
Okay, I'm going to time myself today. How many minutes have I been on the mobile phone?
With no cure available for brain tumours, neurosurgeon Charlie Teo is worried about the possible link.
We're seeing the increase in frequency of tumours in the insular region, which is this region right here, the temporal lobe, the frontal lobe. So it's right there where you hold your phone.
Another neurosurgeon, Richard Bittar, advises to text or only use a mobile on speakerphone. And he has this warning for parents.
It's a pretty big gamble to let a child use a mobile phone at this point in time.
And it's this message that these 4 brain tumour sufferers want to lobby government about.
I just want parents to be more aware of radiation and the possible effects it can have on their child's brain.
For any child under 16, they should only be able to text unless they're calling 000 or their parents.
I mean, don't take the risks with mobile phones. We don't know what they're doing yet.
I would have definitely lessened my mobile phone usage if I could have turned back the clock.
If you own a mobile phone, you must see this. For years, the experts have been arguing over them. Some say they're perfectly safe. Others claim they fry your brains. Well, an international team of doctors, including 2 of Australia's finest surgeons, have just released their latest comprehensive research. And as the father of young children, it really made me sit up and take notice. They say prolonged use of mobile phones could double the risk of malignant brain tumours, the deadliest of all cancers, the kind that leaves no survivors. With an entire generation now growing up hooked on their mobiles, that could be absolutely devastating. The Namoy Valley in northern New South Wales is a beautiful place.
See the range of hills that goes
The favourite view of John and Margaret Bryant.
It's just nice to know that I could sit here and look out over there for a while.
It's beautiful. Little piece of heaven on earth, isn't it?
But John is terrified he won't be looking down upon it for much longer. He has terminal brain cancer.
You've got to hang on, you've been so positive all throughout. So you just got to keep on going.
Yeah.
While there's life, there's hope.
Ironically, after a life of physical toil on the land, this rough-and-tumble farmer blames modern technology for killing him. His mobile phone.
Mate, there's no doubt about mine. I know what killed me.
John, you're saying what killed you as if you're already dead.
Yeah, well, I am dead, aren't I? I'm a dead man walking, really, aren't I? When you think about it.
This is when you knew you were in a bit of strife, was it, when you first went up?
Oh, yeah, when I started.
Last November, John was working in his shearing shed when he lost control of the left side of his body. Doctors found a malignant tumour just behind his right ear.
I told Dr. Hughes, he's a very good doctor, I said, I don't want any crap, tell me the truth, you know. He said, I'll tell you the truth. This is the truth. He said, with this disease, there are no survivors, everyone dies. So that was a good introduction to Tamworth Hospital.
You kids know how they go to sleep in the tree without falling out?
They got sticky bottoms.
This is a large and loving family.
What a big no.
The Bryants have carved a full life here through farming and the family trucking business. John's mobile phone has been an essential tool of the trade for the past 25 years. And he's in no doubt those countless hours with it glued to his ear gave him the brain tumour. I can't begin to imagine what you're going through.
No, no one can begin to imagine, because people come up to me just, you know, they're trying to be nice and they say, I can imagine how you feel. And I think, no, you can't imagine how I feel, you know. And I reckon it's caused definitely by those bloody mobile phones.
Dr. Teo, John insists his brain tumour has been caused by his mobile phone. Do you agree with his diagnosis?
Insist is a strong word. And there are always two sides to every story. But if the question is, do I believe that mobile phones can cause brain cancer, the answer is yes, I do.
Exactly. The fact that you've deteriorated so much in the last 3 days means that you probably won't survive more than about 3 more weeks with this. Yeah. It's that bad.
Yeah, I know. I know it's bad.
Dr. Charlie Teo is John's neurosurgeon, his last hope to beat the tumour. He's also the co-author of a frightening new study that's predicting a dramatic increase in brain tumours caused by the long-term use of mobile phones.
That's a huge fear. I mean, what if we're right? Then if we're right, we're going to see a huge increase in brain tumours and brain cancer in the next decade or so. It's going to be frightening. And guess what, Lamb? We're already frightened by what we're seeing.
Most of us are pretty wary of these things, and with good reason. Microwave ovens use electromagnetic radiation to cook your food. Now, it's exactly the same energy on exactly the same wavelength as the stuff that's being pumped out of your mobile phone. Admittedly, microwaves are a lot more powerful, but you wouldn't consider for a moment holding your ear up to one of these for hours at a time, day after day. Yet that's precisely what most of us are doing with our mobiles.
Long-term use of mobile phones is associated with a doubling of the risk of being diagnosed with certain brain tumours.
You're saying that if you use a mobile phone over an extended period,
right, over 10 years,
you double your risk of developing a brain tumour.
That's what the data that we've analysed, that's what it shows. Vinnie Karana, hello.
Canberra neurosurgeon Dr. Vinnie Karana worked with Charlie Teo and 3 other leading scientists to produce this latest report. And he believes mobile phones could be the biggest public health issue since tobacco. Were you surprised at the size of the result?
I actually think it may be a conservative estimate.
You think doubling the risk is conservative?
Yes. I would be very happy to be wrong about this, because the public health implications of being right about this are enormous. At the moment, there are just over 4 billion users of mobile phones. There are people as young as 3 using them.
And that's where the biggest threat lies, with our kids. Today, being presented with your first mobile is an essential passport to life. Our kids inhabit a wireless world, and it's nothing for them to spend hours each day chatting on the phone.
On the average, I use it about 4 hours a day. I normally have long conversations at night with people. I don't know, I use my phone a lot.
I've got to probably say about at least 4 hours as well. Yeah. This is the way we've been brought up to communicate with our mobile phones, and it's just the easiest because they're portable, we can take them anywhere. So it's just the easiest way to communicate with our friends.
I have been incredibly worried, concerned, depressed at the number of kids that I'm seeing that are coming in with brain tumours, malignant brain tumours. Just in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've seen probably half a dozen kids with tumours that really should have been benign, and they've all been nasty, malignant brain tumours. We are doing something terribly wrong.
But it turns out that my cell phone may be a hazard to me, because the World Health Organization is now warning that cell phone use is, quote, possibly carcinogenic to humans.
There's a handful of studies that have looked at 10 years or more of cell phone use. These studies all find roughly a doubling of the risk of brain tumors on the side on which people say they had been using their phone.
Well, once the ordinance was passed and the regulations were developed, we got slapped with a lawsuit by the telecom industry. The CTIA is the name of the organization that represents cell phone manufacturers and service providers.
They buy silence. They buy apathy. They buy politicians.
The brain of a child absorbs twice as much radiation as an adult. That's a stunning fact. Few people are aware of it. And we are marketing phones and pushing advertising with E-Trade babies talking into cell phones and children running businesses with little phones as though they're benign devices.
I would hold my cell phone here, and the tumor was right there.
The very cell phone companies that are selling us cell phones and telling us that they're safe are at the same time telling us we should hold them an inch from our head. We should wonder what exactly does that mean.
We're beginning to see some evidence coming through in the tumor registry data. I think we will see increasing evidence over time. The country, Israel, for example, has already shown substantial increases in parotid gland tumors in their tumor registry data.
I always held it on my right side, right here. The industry should have put these warnings on these phones a long time ago.
Stories that are critical of cell phones aren't being put on the front page because they'd be going next to a Sprint ad.
It was as if the story had been blacked out.
Maybe we're wrong, but maybe we're right.
Now, an international panel of scientists is raising questions about whether there's a link between cell phones and cancer. Jeffrey Brown has the story.
The news led to provocative headlines, all triggered by an announcement from a panel of the World Health Organization. A team of 31 scientists from 14 countries said radiation emitted by cell phones is, quote, possibly carcinogenic and may be associated with some risk for brain cancer. But the group also said that evidence of a direct link is still far from clear, and it called for more study. A cell phone industry group put out a statement that today's news does not mean cell phones cause cancer. So to walk through what is and is not known, we're joined by Dr. Keith Black, Chair of Neurosurgery and Neuroscience at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Dr. Black, welcome to you. So what does possibly carcinogenic mean exactly?
What it means is that, you know, the World Health Organization panel of scientists looked at the current available evidence that's been published, as well as some unpublished data that should be coming out shortly from the Interpol, which is a multinational study, and concluded that the evidence suggests that there is a possible link between cell phone use and brain cancer. This is looking at multiple studies, but the best conclusion at this point would suggest that there is the possibility for a link.
Now, the issue is the radiation, right? Explain what researchers are concerned about and what they're studying.
So essentially a cell phone is a microwave antenna which generates microwave radiation. And we know that that microwave radiation can penetrate into the brain when you hold the cell phone next to your ear. In fact, it's related to the square of the distance. So the closer, you get a much greater amount of radiation going into the brain. And that radiation energy, when it hits biological tissues, there is some concern that it may actually cause cells over a long-term time period to transform from normal cells into cancer cells.
Well, to be clear now, this is a shift for the WHO, but as I said in the introduction, at the same time, researchers said that they have not found a direct link so far. So tell us, what is it that we don't know, and what makes this hard to make a direct link?
So what we don't know currently is whether cell phone use is safe, and we don't know that it's unsafe. The problem that we have is that about half of the studies have shown that there's no correlation to brain cancer and cell phone use, and half of the studies that have been done have shown a correlation. The problem that we have is that the studies that tend to show no correlation tend to be studies that look at people that have had very short time periods of cell phone use and very low amounts of minutes of using the cell phone. The studies that do show a correlation tend to be studies that have looked at people that have used cell phones for a period of 10 years, for example, and are using cell phones, say, for 30 minutes a day, higher term use. So the longer term studies, the studies that have been somewhat better designed, although still flawed, have tended to show this correlation. The problem we have is that we know that most environmental agents that cause cancer don't cause cancer after a month or a year or 2 years of exposure. The best example I can give to illustrate this is that if one was to start smoking cigarettes when they were 12, we don't expect them to develop lung cancer when they're 22. We expect them to develop lung cancer when they're 42 or 52, 3 or 4 decades of exposure. We just don't have that long period of study with people that have used cell phones.
Well, so of course people wonder what they should do, and this group did not propose guidelines or regulations. As to advice to consumers, I noted that one of the researchers said, pending the availability of additional research, it is important to take pragmatic measures to reduce exposure, such as hands-free devices or texting. So fill in that picture for us. What advice would you give people, given what we know and what we don't know?
So, you know, the best thing is to be informed. I think the best thing for consumers and the best thing about the WHO statement is that at least consumers can be aware that there is a potential risk, and therefore they can begin to sort of take measures to use the cell phone more safely. Even if you read the insert in the cell phone, it'll tell you to hold the cell phone, you know, an inch or so away from your ear so that the radiation doesn't go directly into the brain. Best to use an earpiece, best to use it on speaker mode, best to use text. If you're driving, best to use hands-free, and not to put the cell phone, you know, right adjacent to your brain. The other thing to be aware of is that we haven't had any good studies in the pediatric population. A child's skull is much thinner, the scalp is much thinner, and the amount of radiation that goes into the pediatric brain is much higher than in the adult. So we should be cautious with how we allow our children to use a cell phone. They're going to be the ones not only using it at a much younger age, but using it over a much longer duration.
And just I'm sorry. No, just briefly, I can't resist asking you, Dr. Black, what about you yourself? You use a cell phone, or does this change how you see it?
No, I use a cell phone, but I always use it either on speaker mode or use it with an earpiece or text. I don't put it next to my brain. You know, I think to also just to put this in context for your viewers, you know, the risk of developing brain cancer is about 6 per 100,000 in a population per year. So even if the risk were to double, you're looking at about 12 cases per 100,000 in the population. It doesn't mean that, you know, we're going to be walking down the streets and people are going to be falling over dying of brain cancer. You know, the overall number of people that develop brain cancer, you know, is not like lung cancer or breast cancer. It's a little smaller. But what's important to recognize is that if you do develop brain cancer, it's one of the most devastating illnesses that you can have. So if you want to take precautions, at least you're aware that, you know, your cell phone is not necessarily a safe device, and using the things that we've outlined,
Okay.
earpiece, speaker mode, you know, can be a safer way of using it.
All right, Dr. Keith Black, thanks so much. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
When it comes to school, many parents consider it a second home for their kids. And when the students go into their classroom, parents expect a safe environment. But some believe their schools are not doing everything they can to keep their kids safe, and it could lead to serious health consequences. Today's technology taking these kids on a virtual trip to the moon.
This is the Great Wall of China.
And to myriad other places in the universe. Montgomery County Schools is the first school system in our area to partner with Google to offer the Expeditions Pioneer program. Smartphones inside cardboard boxes. An app takes the kids to the location virtually.
The first I heard of Google Expedition is when my 9-year-old came home and told me about the exciting field trip she took.
But Laura Simon questioned the safety of kids putting smartphones to their heads next to their eyes.
The kids were complaining of headaches and nausea and dizziness, and they had eye strain. And there was a Google rep there that just said, you know, just take a few minutes, this is normal.
Laura is a member of a parent organization called Safe Tech for Schools Maryland, fighting for the safe use of technology in the classroom. It's not just Google Expeditions that has them concerned, it's the whole technology program in the Montgomery County school system. MCPS recently purchased 40,000 laptops and Chromebooks for students from the 3rd grade level to high school. They upgraded the Wi-Fi system, installing routers or access points, some right in the middle of the classroom ceiling, over student desks. They are emitting radio frequencies all day long. Lisa Klein's 8-year-old son has his own school-issued Chromebook.
I'm concerned that he's getting exposed to radiation, even low levels, without my consent, but mostly without knowing what it's going to do to him long term.
Neither Klein nor the rest of the parent organization is asking to get rid of the technology. They simply want it used safely.
This is a health issue. And at MCPS, it's being treated like a technology issue.
They need to teach students how to use their devices safely, and there should not be wireless in the schools.
Sherwin Collette, Chief Technology Officer for MCPS, declined an interview with Fox 5. But in a Board of Education meeting last September, he said reducing Wi-Fi in his school system makes no sense.
We cannot live by a precautionary principle on this count that says, ooh, because we may not know something, we must do nothing and we would hardwire all devices. It makes no sense.
I think that the Montgomery County schools are misinformed, and they're making a huge mistake that is compromising the health and safety of the students and of the teachers.
An expert on bioelectric magnetics, Dr. Deborah Davis is the founder of the Environmental Health Trust, a nonprofit working to protect kindergarten and middle school children from health risks of cell phones and Wi-Fi systems. She's done more than 200 studies on the subject and says even relatively low exposure can interrupt normal brain or reproductive development in a child.
We think that this is going to be related to leukemia and possibly lymphomas later on as well. And again, the question is, do you want to experiment on your children?
In 2011, the World Health Organization classified radio frequency electromagnetic fields, including Wi-Fi and cell phone signals, as possibly carcinogenic to humans. Some scientists say radio frequency waves don't cause cancer, but more and more experts in the field are coming forward expressing concern. The American Academy of Pediatrics, along with the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, are urging the FCC to adopt up-to-date radiation standards. Current standards are 20 years old and don't account for a child's use. More than a dozen scientists and pediatric neurology experts from Harvard to the California Brain Tumor Association have written letters to MCPS, joining the parent organization in urging the school system to switch to wired technology.
To hear people, oncologists and epidemiologists, saying, I don't know about this stuff, I mean, that's good enough for me. I don't want my child to be the guinea pig in that experiment.
Well, we reached out to the FCC with questions, and they too declined our request for an interview, but they did release this statement. Quote, the U.S. has among the most conservative standards in the world. As part of our routine review of these standards, we are soliciting input from multiple stakeholder experts, including federal health agencies and others, to guide our assessment. Meanwhile, Russia, Italy, France, Switzerland, China, Belgium are among more than 20 other countries in the world that have enacted policies to reduce Wi-Fi school and exposure in schools. And there are communities here in the U.S., including several in Massachusetts and in New York and in California, that are taking action to reduce Wi-Fi or even ban Wi-Fi altogether.
It's interesting. It's scary. I mean, think of how often we have, you know, this technology up, you know, so close to us, our phones that we put to our head, and you know, you don't realize.
There's even a disclaimer on the phone that says, don't put it right next to your head. Use your earphones, but people don't know. People don't know.
All right, good information. Thanks, Laura.
Around the world, an increasing number of governments and authorities have banned or warned against the use of Wi-Fi in schools. Many experts, scientists and doctors are warning the public to take a precautionary approach. Why? Let's examine the facts. Wi-Fi is a wireless technology that allows computers, tablets and smartphones to exchange data wirelessly to a computer network. This data is transferred using microwave electromagnetic radiation. You can't see it, taste it or smell it, yet we are increasingly using this technology every day. Wi-Fi uses microwaves of the same frequency as cordless phones and microwave ovens, but with less power. This is the non-ionizing radiation portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Microwaves are a smaller section within the broader range of radio frequencies. The electromagnetic spectrum ranges from radio, mobile phones, Wi-Fi and microwaves, radar, visible light through to ultraviolet light, and then the ionizing forms of radiation such as X-rays, and finally radioactive elements. Wi-Fi has a standard range of 30 metres indoors. However, walls, building materials, filing cabinets, etc. can reduce the effective range. In a school setting, the wireless access point connects laptops and tablets to the school's wired computer network, which in turn is usually connected to the internet. A Wi-Fi access point is always on and broadcasts its unique ID continually so that new devices can find it. In our Wi-Fi setup, one email takes around 1/40th of a second to transfer wirelessly from the computer to the access point. A typical 3-minute video clip is about 550 times bigger than an email. So, using the Wi-Fi, it takes around 12 seconds to download this 3-minute video. Now let's look at this in a classroom setting. Here is a class of 20 students, all with wireless devices. If 20 students in the class all downloaded a 3-minute video at the same time, it would take 4 minutes. 4 minutes of the access point at full constant power, or the equivalent of sending 10,000 emails. Now keep in mind, this is just one class downloading one 3-minute video. How about all the other classrooms in the school building? In Australian schools, the future projection is to make all students carry notebooks or tablets and to have more resources online via the national curriculum. That's videos, tutorials, books and online quizzes. You can imagine that at the start of each lesson, the entire school will be accessing the network wirelessly to download the resources for that lesson. During these times, the power density of the Wi-Fi will be at its maximum throughout the entire school. There are no scientific studies that have been conducted specifically to investigate the health effects from Wi-Fi in schools. However, there is an increasing amount of scientific research on related wireless technologies like mobiles, mobile phone towers and cordless phones that suggest there are possible health risks from the use of these technologies. Humans are electromagnetic beings. The human heart, brain and nervous system works by using electrical signals, and this can be monitored using EEG and ECG. The fact that doctors use electrotherapy for healing purposes proves that frequencies do interact and have an effect on the body. Although some frequency bands are beneficial for healing, other non-ionizing frequencies have potentially harmful biological effects. Growing numbers of scientists believe that artificial sources of electromagnetic radiation are interfering with the body's natural bioelectrical signals. Some people may be affected by exposure to Wi-Fi microwave radiation, and others may develop sensitivity to electromagnetic radiation. Reported symptoms include headaches, dizziness, anxiety, insomnia, loss of concentration, loss of memory, pressure in the eyes, deterioration in vision, sensitivity to light, nosebleeds, impaired sense of smell, ringing in ears, hearing loss, fatigue, weakness, numbness, tingling, heart palpitations and arrhythmia, shortness of breath, high blood pressure, skin problems, digestive problems and nausea, muscle and joint pain. Research also indicates to an increased likelihood of more serious long-term effects including infertility, cancer and DNA damage. Radiation penetrates the body of a child or young person more than it does an adult. This makes children more vulnerable to microwave radiation due to their thinner skulls, softer bones, underdeveloped immune system and developing cells. They will also have a longer lifetime of exposure to EMR than adults today. The Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, ARPANSA, is the Australian government agency which sets the standard limits for radiation exposure as outlined by the International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, ICNIRP. Radio frequency standards were developed in the 1950s for high-powered radar systems. The standards in Australia have remained virtually the same since this time. These safety limits are based on short-term thermal injury. This means that the safety standards are only based on the heating or burning of body tissue in a short period of time, like a microwave oven. The current safety limits do not take into account any non-thermal long-term effects. This means that any biological changes to the body other than heating are not taken into account. Research studies funded by the telecommunications industry rarely show any biological effects. In contrast to this, however, the vast majority of independently funded research report long-term biological effects such as neurologic, endocrine, immune, cardiac, reproductive and other biological effects including cancer. All we can say about the current Australian safety standards is that we won't heat up using Wi-Fi. Increasing numbers of scientists and organisations from around the world are calling for the outdated safety standards to be changed. The Council of Europe states that the limits on exposure to electromagnetic fields which have been set for the general public are obsolete. They have been calling for stricter exposure limits for all equipment which emits electromagnetic waves. They believe the current permitted standards fail to protect the public against harmful biological effects which may not become known until after years of exposure. Since some people are experiencing health effects at levels well below the current exposure limits, experts want governments to inform the public about the possible risks so that the public may use this technology more safely. Since untested wireless technologies are advancing into our homes, schools, work and public spaces faster than experts can evaluate EMR health risks, scientists and doctors are calling for precautionary measures to be taken immediately to prevent extensive damage to public health. Countries like Switzerland, Italy, France, Austria, Luxembourg, Bulgaria, Poland, Hungary, Israel, Russia and China have set exposure limits 100 to 10,000 times less than Australia. This is because they recognise that there can be biological effects caused by electromagnetic radiation. The Council of Europe has called for a ban on Wi-Fi use in schools and recommends wired internet connections in schools. Several schools in England and France have dismantled their Wi-Fi systems and reverted to a wired system due to concerns raised by parents and teachers. The French National Library, along with other libraries and some universities, have removed all Wi-Fi networks. Wi-Fi has also been removed from all schools in the town of Hurreville, St. Clair. The Bavarian Parliament has recommended that no schools in the province use wireless. The Frankfurt city government said that it would not install Wi-Fi in its schools until it has been proven to be harmless. The German government recommends against installation of Wi-Fi in schools, the removal of cordless phones and to use cabled connections rather than Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The Public Health Department of Salzburg has advised schools not to use Wi-Fi. In Russia and Poland, the safety limits are much lower to include non-thermal effects. In 2008, the Russian Radiation Protection Committee gave a warning about the serious and irreparable consequences of electromagnetic radiation, especially for children. They increased this warning again in 2011 and recommended that Wi-Fi not be used in schools. In Austria, the Austrian Medical Association has pressed for a ban of Wi-Fi in schools. The Swiss government has issued caution in regard to wireless radiation emitted by baby monitors, cell phones, laptops and tablets, etc. Israel's Minister of Health supports a call to ban Wi-Fi in schools. In May 2011, the World Health Organization classified radiofrequency electromagnetic radiation as possible human carcinogens. This is the same category as DDT, dry cleaning chemicals, lead, pesticides and engine exhaust. Although there have been earlier alerts about the health risks from EMR and calls for stricter guidelines to protect public health, this recent WHO warning about EMR's possible carcinogenic risk highlights the need for an urgent precautionary approach. What is a precautionary approach? When an action or policy carries the risk of harm to human health, even if there is some scientific uncertainty about the cause and effect, precautionary measures should be taken. We need to take responsible measures to reduce exposure to EMR until research demonstrates conclusive results. Some authorities in Europe and elsewhere have made conclusions about Wi-Fi health risks to children based on these reports and related studies that have examined the long-term health effects of mobile phone and mobile phone tower emissions. Australia, however, has no restrictions on the use of Wi-Fi in schools, and with policies such as the Digital Education Revolution initiative, tablets and laptops are being vigorously rolled out in schools. The federal government says that the choice to install wireless networks is one that is made by education authorities. However, the education authorities are not qualified to make decisions about public health. They just say that they are within the current safety standards as set by a PANZA. At present, no one in government is acknowledging the potential for long-term biological risks of wireless in schools. If the standards are only for heating of tissue, who will be held responsible for all other biological effects? Surely the Ministry of Health should be responsible for assessing long-term risks from EMR and protecting children's health. Wireless devices are installed without any radiation emissions checks in each specific site where they are installed. Teachers and staff are unaware and untrained about monitoring the effects of EMR on children, so they are unable to recognise any symptoms from EMR exposure. Evaluating the possible long-term health effects on school children is not being conducted by the education authorities, government or the standard-setting agencies. APANZA, who sets the standards, says, "Research relating to children is limited and the possibility of harm cannot be completely ruled out." Given that Wi-Fi has not been proven to be safe for long-term biological effects and there are no specific studies conducted to look at the risk to children, why are these wireless EMR technologies being rolled out in schools? When it comes to long-term health risks, governments don't always take swift actions or a precautionary approach. This was the case with smoking and asbestos. In addition to public health, governments have many responsibilities including the economy, taxation and foreign policy. These can conflict with the government's health protection role. In Australia, telecommunications is an $18 billion industry per year. This is a huge economic success and valuable tax revenue for the government. To protect these interests, government and industry want conclusive evidence of biological effects. This could take another 15 to 20 years, by which time the damage could be extensive and irreversible to children. Employees of the telecommunications industry are often the experts called upon to provide advice on the safety limits. Surely there is a conflict of interest in having industry representatives tasked with this responsibility. In Australia, APANSA follows ICNIRP's exposure limits. However, the European Parliament raises concerns about ICNIRP's unclear origin and structure and suspects ICNIRP of having rather close links with the industries. They also say that the industry benefits from recommendations for maximum threshold values of electromagnetic fields. Could this be the reason why obsolete safety standards are maintained and biological effects are disregarded despite mounting independent scientific evidence? Scientists from both sides agree that more research is needed. However, independent research which shows biological effects fails to receive further funding. Some scientists who have conducted research and found evidence of biological effects have been discredited, discriminated, had their funding stopped and their research prevented from being published. Shouldn't these very scientists be the ones that are supported and funded to clarify research into this area of uncertainty? Isn't it crucial to support genuine independent research that can provide objective evidence to protect public health rather than industry profits? We can't use obsolete safety standards developed for radar to prevent short-term heating injuries and hope that there are no long-term effects to children when used in a classroom setting. We urgently need objective, credible research into the long-term biological effects of wireless on children. We can't afford to put the convenience of wireless technology and cheaper short-term costs before children's health. Authorities like the European Parliament and the European Environmental Agency believe that there is already sufficient scientific evidence for governments to take an immediate precautionary approach, especially to protect children who are most vulnerable. They state that waiting for high levels of scientific and clinical proof can lead to very high health and economic costs, as was the case in the past with asbestos, leaded petrol and tobacco. However, ignoring the early warning could be much worse as EMR affects everyone. All populations are now exposed to varying amounts of electromagnetic fields. These levels will continue to increase as technology advances. Over the last 15 years, there has been a steep increase in illness amongst young people. Allergies, asthma, autism, learning disorders, behaviour disorders, ADHD, concentration problems, strokes and brain tumours have been rising each year. Some scientific reports have matched these spikes in illness with the published research on the effects of low-level radiation on human health. They show how the increase in illness corresponds with the increased use of wireless communication technologies over the past 15 years. Currently in Australia, despite the early warnings, more and more new wireless technologies are introduced into our daily lives. Mobile phones, 3G, 4G, cordless phones, Wi-Fi, baby monitors, digital radio and TV, smart electrical meters and other smart appliances. In the face of uncertainty, where children are concerned, shouldn't we take smarter options to reduce the exposure from wireless radiation in schools? Chronic exposure to wireless radiation is a preventable environmental hazard that is sufficiently well documented to warrant immediate precautionary actions. Responsible authorities overseas have responded by banning or warning against the use of Wi-Fi in schools. It is time for the Australian Government and education authorities to take responsible precautionary measures to reduce the risks from EMR exposure. Wi-Fi in Schools Australia fully supports the use of technology, computers and the internet for education in schools. We also believe that schools have a duty of care and need to provide a safe learning environment for all children. We believe that schools should not expose our children unnecessarily to the long-term risks from the use of wireless technology. We favour wired communications as a safer option until there is conclusive evidence that there are no harmful effects from long-term use. Please get informed, pass on this knowledge to family, friends, politicians and decision makers. Please support our call to stop the use of Wi-Fi in schools until this technology has been proven safe for long-term use. For more facts and to find out what you can do, visit wifiinschoolsaustralia.org.